as an artist, I've always loved creating creatures. It's something I've always been passionate about. It's something I've always wanted to do with my 3D art, and it's just something I've always loved to do. I've done it previously in a lot of my other projects. You'll probably notice that my hard surface work, both of those were creatures. The last character I did in my second year was a creature. It's just something I want to focus on in my art. So when we were tasked with creating anything for our major project, you know, the obvious idea for me would be to create, a monster, a creature, something to really I guess, catch the eye of my portfolio. But before I could, create this giant creature, I needed to know what I was actually creating. Now, there were a lot of different options that I could go for. I knew I wanted to create something based off a 2D concept. As much as I love creating designs for creatures and stuff, it's something that I just don't think would have been possible with the time restraints of this project. I think it's bad enough to, well, not bad enough, but it's hard enough to create a full asset and render and everything in that time, let alone create a design as well. So it's just something I didn't want to focus my time on. I just wanted to get straight into the asset, and I wanted to, I guess, practice with turning a 2D asset into a 3D asset. I think it's something I'll have to do in the future a lot, so I might as well get the practice in now. But even with that, though, a creature is a broad term. I didn't know what to look for, so I've started thinking. I was like, okay, what's a cool creature? What's a creature that everyone likes? Because as much as I love to do my interest, I wanted it to look good on a portfolio so that anyone could be like, whoa, that's cool. Not just the niche fans of this one specific type of monster, which is how I landed on doing a dragon. I think everyone loves dragons and stuff. I think dragons are very I guess applicable. They can be anything really. Anything can fall under the umbrella term of a dragon, which is one of the issues I had though, because it's where do I start with looking with what I want to do? But that's where I incorporate one of my other interests, which is creepy stuff, like horror related stuff, Halloween stuff. I just, I love that. It really interests me. And it's something I'm really passionate for, I guess, creating 3D or 2D. So I started to search on ArtStation, and I was searching keywords such as Halloween dragon, spooky dragon, you know, basic stuff like that, and ended up landing on the concept that I ended up choosing. And then there's a lot of different reasons why I ended up choosing this concept. I've discussed two of them, but another one of the reasons was it would give me something new to learn as well. I had to choose this concept before I did my literature review, so I knew what I was writing it about. And this concept also possessed I guess hair, fur, and it also possessed these flames. So I was thinking to myself, I was like, how am I going to do this? But that kind of excited me because it was it would be something new, it'd be something new I could learn about. Because it's so great just sculpting the whole thing. I could very easily sculpt the hair and the flames and everything and just do it all sculpted, but I wouldn't really learn anything from that. It'd almost be too easy. So I was like, okay, I'm going to learn how to do hair and fur for this project, and that's what I'm going to focus on in my literature review. And it's something, hair and fur as well, is just something that's very, I guess, common with a lot of creatures. If I really wanted to focus my art on creature and character design, I need to know how to do any kind of creature or character. So I was like, okay, I think hair and fur is going to be really beneficial to learn. So I was like, okay, let's go for it. Let's do this project then. I've had this issue in the past though with a lot of my other creatures that I've done. I made this really cool bear, but I couldn't get past the modelling stage because I didn't know how to do the fur on it. I didn't know how to tackle it. So I thought, if I get through this project, worst case scenario, the project turns bad, but at least I know how to make fur now, and I can apply that into my future projects, which I think is one of the, I guess, big selling points to this concept right here. It also helps that it looks really cool, and I was really excited to create it. But yeah, that was what led me to choose this concept, and now I'm going to talk about how I actually started to plan everything out before I could model. Start modeling and everything, all the fun stuff like that, I had to first plan everything out, because if I didn't plan anything out, I would end up just crashing and the project wouldn't work that well. So the first thing I did was I set up a Trello board on the internet. Trello, I've used Trello before in a lot of my projects. It's really good for just I guess planning everything out, getting a feel for everything. I put in all of our deadline dates, all the milestones, like every week milestone, and I set myself goals. Of course, I couldn't predict like other circumstances. So, like for example, if maybe I got ill one week and I couldn't work as much, I couldn't predict that. But in order to, I guess, help that, I set myself up to finish the project about 2 weeks before it was actually due, so that if I wanted to have Easter off, for example, or if I wasn't well enough to work one week, it was fine. I'd have that 2 week safety buffer. I'd have that safety buffer, and I'd be okay. And after that was done, I needed to actually figure out how I was going to tackle this design. I knew that the hair and fur was to be discussed later down the line. I didn't want to worry about it just now. I just wanted to focus on the actual things I could model. So when you look at this concept, you don't know what's going on. So I had to break up every part of it with this chart I made. I color coded every little part of it, and just to separate it up to more manageable chunks so that I could isolate it and model it separately. And it really helped, honestly. I think I'll definitely do this more going forward. I haven't done it before for any of them on one of my projects, but it really did help. It helped me visualize everything a lot better, because when the concept is all together, you really can't visualize how you would even attempt to model it. So breaking it up like this is really useful, and I'm definitely going to be doing it again. Also, before I could start the modelling, I wanted to gather a lot of references. Obviously, a dragon is a fantastical creature. It doesn't actually exist. You can't reference a real life dragon, but there are animals that do have similar anatomy. I looked at Komodo dragons. I looked at fossils of dinosaurs, recreations of dinosaurs, and I just looked at those to see how their I guess muscle structure would work. I already do have I guess knowledge of creature anatomy, because I'm a 2D artist as well. I've been drawing for a couple of years now, so I do have a general understanding, but still references never hurt. I gathered quite a lot. I looked to a lot of real life animals for reference. I used bats as well for the wings. Just general stuff that can make my life a lot easier where the reference fails, I guess. Because the 2D reference it's what it is, it's 2D. I can't see like the whole circumference of it all, so I do have to use a lot of inference, and real life references really do help with that. So now that the planning was out of the way, I could actually start making the model. I knew I wanted to use ZBrush for this. I am most familiar with ZBrush. I do a lot of the work in ZBrush, and I think it is just catered more towards sculpting, which is what I enjoy doing. So the one issue I had with this, though, I didn't know whether I wanted to block out with Z-spheres or with just subtools. I ended up going with Z-spheres because I have more experience with it in the past, and also it's really easy to keep it all symmetrical when using Z-spheres. It pretty much does the work for you. So that's what I use to block everything out. You'll be able to notice in the background there is a recording of me doing the block out right now. And one thing about me, though, is something that I need to, I guess, drill into my head every time I start a project, is not to be too detail orientated. I need to just learn to keep it all simple in the blockout stage. I think I did it quite successfully this time. I managed to block out every, separate part of the dragon before I started to add detail, and, I'm quite proud of myself for that. It's very easy to get lost in the details, and it's just something I can't afford to do in the blockout stage, especially when everything is changing constantly. Now, when I started this project, I knew that I wanted it to be more stylized. The reference is pretty stylized as well, with a few realistic elements, but at the end of the day, it's not semi-real. It's not realistic. So I wanted to keep that design in mind when it came to my 3D modeling. So when the question of whether I wanted to use an alpha came up, I thought against it, because I feel like if I made the skin details of it too realistic, yet I had these stylized elements like the flames and stuff, I was just worried it might clash and it might look a bit out of place. So also for time restraints as well, I would have had to create my own alpha, and I just fancy doing that, honestly. So I just kept to hand painted details or hand sculpted details. I feel like as well it's a lot easier to control as well. I can switch it up whenever I need to, and that's what I did, and I think it kind of worked. Well, as I know, I kept a lot of the models separate. I think it's a lot easier to manage when it's all separate, especially when it comes down to retopologizing. And I knew I was going to be hand retopologizing a lot of this, so I wanted to keep it as easy as possible. I kept all the different skin details separate. You know, any of the I guess stringy pieces of skin are separate as well because I knew that if I was stretching pieces of the body and like connecting it, that would just be a Dynamesh nightmare, and I didn't want to ruin any of the detail on the main body, so I just kept it completely separate. I did think this definitely benefited me when it came down to I guess rigging as well. Like it's just so much easier to keep it all separate, and it doesn't really affect anything. It's easier as well when it comes to making UV sets as well. I can very easily switch between them, and yeah, definitely doing this in my future projects. So for the retopology, because my model was so many pieces, I knew that it wasn't realistic for me to quad draw everything. I knew I wanted to hand retopologize the main parts, like the body, the head, the wings, everything that's like big and would be really dense if I just zero meshed it. I needed to retopologize by hand, and I did this using the quad draw tool in Maya. I have used this before, but only once for the last project I did, the beetle, and honestly, it's really easy to do. It's just very time consuming, especially with a lot more complex details on models. So I knew that if I was going to hand retopologize every single piece, I was going to be here forever. So I thought, for the sake of time restraints, I would hand retopologize the main parts and then zero mesh all the little parts that would honestly not even look that different if I had just hand retopologized them. And I'm glad I did this because just retopologizing the main parts by hand took me about 2 weeks, and I can imagine it would take me another week, if not maybe 2 weeks, to do all the rest, and that was just time I could not afford to waste. So when it came down to retopologizing the tail vertebrae, I did struggle quite a lot because the way I had made the tail, I had made it up. I'd made every single vertebrae separate, so I'd made it out of three separate subtools, and then obviously that was duplicated along the entire tail. And I liked the way it looked, but it just made retopologizing it an absolute nightmare. So what I ended up doing was, instead of hand quad drawing it, I ended up combining all of the tail as one subtool and then zero meshing it. I did try to combine it all and then quad draw it, but it wasn't working at all, and I definitely couldn't separate it for UVs or anything. It was just a big pain, and I knew if I was going to hand do this, it was going to literally take me a week just to do this on its own, maybe even longer. So I ended up zero meshing the whole thing, and honestly, the end result looks fine. I think it projected the detail from the high poly really well, so it worked, and it wasn't too dense either. So it ended up working, but it is a shame I couldn't do it by hand. But obviously, I just don't think it would have been possible. So the retopology went pretty smoothly, and then I swiftly started on texture work. But before I could do that, I had to bake the whole model. I genuinely didn't have any issues with the bake. I had to flick a couple of switches around on the ambient occlusion maps. I set the bake settings to matching names with the low and the high poly, and honestly, everything worked really smoothly. I didn't have any issues with that. But one thing I did have an issue with was my substance painter. So I had been doing the textured, I had pretty much finished like the main body of it all, but then my substance painter file just completely got corrupted. I don't know what happened. I lost all the progress that I made, and that was about. It was only a couple of hours of progress, but I was really bumming. It bummed me out. But it also taught me to save my substance files in increments instead. So as you can see, I took that to heart, and I have quite a few now. But yeah, no, it just sucks. I'm just so glad it happened this earlier on and not like after days of work. But yeah, moving on. I wanted to start thinking about doing the hair cards and the flame cards. I wasn't sure how to approach it though, and I followed a couple of tutorials on how people did it, and I realized the easiest way for me to do it was to actually create the hair cards myself. I was looking at pre-made ones and stuff, and I think for this project, because of how stylized it is, how like I guess personalized the actual fur and the hair is, I was just better off doing it myself, and it would teach me as well how to do it. So I did the whole thing how you would normally do with hair cards, and I took to Maya. I made little bases. I baked that onto a sheet and then I started texturing it in Substance Painter. And obviously, because the model is very stylized, I wanted a lot of the detail to be in the texture work rather than the actual like base of the model. So I did a lot of work on the textures of it. I think the hair. I had a lot of issues with it to start off with, especially when I put it back into Substance Painter. It looked really flat, but that was just because of my alpha map. I had done my alpha map too, I guess, blocky. I hadn't added a lot of hair strands to it, and I did go back and I did change that, and the end result does look a lot better now. It looks more like hair rather than like tubes, I suppose. And I also took this, I guess, advice and I incorporated it into my flames that I did as well because I didn't want them looking too blocky either. All in all, though, this was pretty easy. It took a bit to wrap my head around. I had to watch a lot of tutorials to really, like, I guess, get it in my head. But after I did that, it was pretty easy doing the flames because I could just take what I learned from doing the hair and incorporate to the flames. I had to get my tutor for help on how to actually set it up in Substance Painter and how to import it all back in there. But honestly, it went pretty smoothly, and I'm glad I did it because now I know how to do hair. So going back to the textures now, all the textures that I did were hand painted. I didn't use a single generator, and there is a reason for that. I usually don't like using generators in my work anyway, but one of the reasons why I stuck to hand painted textures was because of how stylized I wanted it to be. I feel like if you use generators, there's a lot less agency on you as an artist on where everything goes, whereas hand painting everything, you have complete control. And yeah, having that control was important for me because I feel like it allowed me to follow the reference more closely, whereas if I was using generators and I was, I guess, like guesstimating how I could make it follow up with the reference, it wouldn't have been as accurate. And there would have been places where I'd have to, I guess, just infer and be like, well, this is good enough, it's close enough. Whereas I wanted it to be as close as to the reference as I could make it. So I think hand painted textures really helped there. I think speaking of how close it was to the reference, so there was one thing that I wasn't too happy with the texture work, and it was along the middle of the not dinosaur, the dragon. It has like a green sort of hue along near its arms and like its leg and its stomach, and I didn't really capture that in the texture work. I think to like do this better, I probably could have like done some green on another layer and then lowered the opacity, maybe blended it a bit better so it's there subtly. I don't think it's a case of like time management. I think it's just a case of, I guess, like detail priority. I think I just kind of forgot about it because there's so much details on this design. It kind of just slipped past me. But I think in the future I should keep an eye out for those little details like that, just to ensure it looks as close as possible to the reference as I can get it. I also added a lot of emissive maps in the texture work, you'll notice. I think these worked pretty well. I've added emissives before in my previous projects, and I think it always helps to, I guess, liven up something and make it look more alive. I think one thing that I could have done is maybe add more blur to it. I think it's a bit too sharp sometimes in some places, especially like underneath the like underbelly. But I wanted to kind of replicate like a sort of like a rib cage with it, and I think it works with that. I don't the original design. I couldn't see the bottom half of it, so I was kind of going off my own. I think one thing though is the style that I went for. It doesn't really match the references I'd like it to. I wanted this to kind of be like if the 2D reference was just thrown into 3D. Like, I wanted it to look like an exact replica, but obviously it doesn't because I made mine a lot more sharp with the details and stuff. It's a lot more flashy and colourful. I do think it worked a lot better though because obviously the haircuts that I did, like the flames and stuff, they were very blocky and very like big and colourful. So I think if I went for a more realistic texture style with the body, I think it might have clashed a little bit. So I think it did work, but looking back at the reference now and looking back at my finished work, I think that I definitely could have, I guess, made it a bit less stylized and less cartoony and think it would have worked, but I think it still looks amazing. I'm still really proud of it. I just think it's just something I could keep in mind for like, the next project. So I am going to briefly talk about the rigging because it's only my second time doing rigging and there's still a lot I can learn. I had to make my own skeleton for it because it's obviously not a person. I followed a YouTube tutorial pretty much word for word, and it went pretty well. The actual like rigging and posing was fine and everything. I think one issue I had though was to do with like I guess skin weights. Some of the like for example when I was moving the arm, the hair would move as well, and it was really annoying. I didn't really have the time to spend ages like painting weights and stuff and everything so that it wouldn't move. So I just kind of went along with it and edited it in the renders, and it doesn't look that bad, honestly. You can hardly notice it. It's not necessarily about the rig, but it is to do with the rig mesh. I did have an issue with it towards the end. It was when I was making my wireframe renders. So it turns out when I was exporting from Substance Painter, I had applied the triangulation effect without realizing, and it's something I just need to remember to click off when I do it. So basically, the mesh that was being posed and stuff was a triangulated one, and obviously it was a lot easier to work with and stuff. So when it came down to doing the wireframe renders of it, it was all a triangulated wireframe. It wasn't one I wanted to showcase. So for that, basically, I just had to take the original mesh, the unposed mesh, unfortunately, and just do a separate wireframe renders of those, which is why it's not posed in the portfolio pictures. It is a bit annoying, but it can't be helped. But yeah, it's just an issue I came across, and it's something I will remember to do in the future. So now moving on to rendering and stuff, I didn't want my dragon to just be out in the void, so I wanted to have an environment to set on. I already had an idea of making a graveyard for it, because I feel like it fits, being an undead dragon, you know, a graveyard, it works. So I decided to make a graveyard. I used a lot of real life references, and I wanted to keep in mind of the pose that I wanted the dragon to set on. Unfortunately, I don't have it right now, but I did do a couple of really rushed sketches just to get like a little bit of a pose going on with the environment. I was initially planning on adding a tree, one that I had created in my previous project. I think it would have fit the vibes of it all, but also I did not want to take away from the dragon, and I feel like having a big tree would make it more of an environment rather than a character like asset that I'm showcasing. So yeah, I just went without the tree, and I think it worked a lot better that way. I did struggle with a lot of the textures, like for example, when I first did it, all the textures looked really muddy and stuff, and the bright blue dragon just looked really out of place. So it was more like a purple and orange hue on the environment instead of like a green one that I initially planned. And I think it worked a lot well. Obviously the purple and the orange contrast with the blue of the dragon, so I think it does work a lot. So I could have added like grass and stuff. I feel like that would have made it look a lot more alive rather than just kind of like flat. I couldn't really justify spending more than like a few days on it, honestly. But yeah, for what it's worth, I think it works quite well, and the dragon looks cool posed on it. Now, finally, for the renders, I used Marmoset. I use Marmoset a lot. It's my favourite thing to do. I think it's really good for character work, and it just makes everything look really nice. So I did some basic renders, I suppose. I just added some fill lights around, and I wanted the dragon to look illuminated enough to the fact that you could see every detail, but also it wasn't too bright. I wanted the scene to be dark, but also I didn't want it to be so dark that you were like squint. I added a lot of fill lights. I also added a fog. I had to watch a tutorial on how to do that. I ended up not really liking the fog. If the dragon looked more realistic, I think the realistic fog would have worked, but I don't know, it clashed a lot with the actual dragon, so I decided just to add it in post. So yeah, every one of my renders was edited in Photoshop, apart from obviously the turntable. I couldn't really do that. The reason why I edited it in Photoshop is because it's a stylized piece, I can add like hand painted elements on top, which I wouldn't be able to add onto like a 360 render. So like I added some more flame effects and stuff to make it look like the were flickering like real life fire. I added some fog as well, some stylized fog, just so it could kind of, I guess, frame the dragon as the focus. I wanted it to make it look like it was part of a scene, like it was actually happening in real life. So that fog kind of broke up the contrast between the sky and the environment edge, so it just made it flow a lot better and made it look like it was actually like inside of a real scene. About some, I guess, like what went well, what didn't go well kind of stuff. I think for what went well, I think my time management. I think if it wasn't for like planning everything early on in Trello and stuff and keeping up to date with everything, I definitely wouldn't have been able to complete in time. I actually did get the Trello date wrong. I thought we had 2 extra weeks on this project, but we didn't. But I was able to quickly turn that around, quickly able to crunch a bit more and get it all finished, even despite that. So I think that was to do with my good time management skills. Also with the planning and everything, like earlier on with blocking everything out and planning out what goes where, and so I think that really did help with visualizing the end result and like breaking it all down into simpler parts. It stopped me from getting overwhelmed with all the details to start off with, and it helped me get the silhouette right first. Also, I'm glad that I got more experience rigging. I think I'd only ever done it once before, and it was really quick. So I think any experience is like good experience with that. and I know what I need to do for the future now. And also, the main reason why I did this project was to do with hair and fur creation, and I safe to say I learned how to do that, and I'm very confident with doing that. I feel like I can take it a bit further now and incorporate it into other projects. Moving forward, I do want to go back to that bear I made, and I want to finish that off and make the hair and fur for that now that I know what I'm doing. And yeah, I'm very grateful that I completed this project. I'm really happy with the end result, and yeah, I think it went really well. Pretty proud of it.